This is the Astro Primer of August 7th through August 14th, 2019. Ho, 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 ho. And welcome in, everybody. It is Milky Way Wednesday, and the first thing we're going to do is talk about the sky. What are you going to capture this week? So check out my iPad. So looking over here at photo pills in the moon pill, we'll begin this week doing our northern hemisphere. And let me move the chat that's over here into a different section so I can see any questions that pop up today. Welcome in, guys. I'm excited to see you, Stanley, Kathy, and Ankit all talking. Is everyone here from planet Earth? Yes, Ankit, we are. We are. At least some of us wish we were maybe from, a different planet. Make it a little more interesting. Switch it up a little bit. Hey, Phil. Phil's here. Awesome. So let's get going. Astro Primer. So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you have the same situation. Well, I shouldn't even say Northern Hemisphere. Everywhere we are dealing with the reality of the moon. The moon is first quarter and leading into its full moon. And so this week we're just going to enjoy every night get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So let's look at what our first opportunity is. So if you guys go out tonight, right after Milky Way Wednesday, you have an opportunity in Northern Hemisphere, most likely something similar to this, where you will see that the moon sets on you at, let's go to Thursday. It doesn't set on us tonight. It sets tomorrow morning. So go over to Thursday, and that's what I'm trying to switch over to, and that's 12:55. So when that moon finally sets at 12:55, you can get an opportunity of the Milky Way from there until around 2 in the morning, depending on what's in front of you. If you have a high, tall mountain, it's going to block the core, but the Milky Way will not be washed out by the moon lighting it up. And that continues for a couple days. But then on Saturday night, so if you got Friday night into Saturday morning, you're going to see that the Milky Way is still up and setting while the moon is still up on the horizon. So 2:12, the moon is finally setting, and that's knocking us out for the remainder of the week, which is very, very, very devastating. Because why? August 11th, 12th, and 13th. What is so special about August 11th, 12th through 13th? Well, the Perseid meteor shower. That awesome meteor shower every year usually is awesome, fantastic, amazing, and those are the peak mornings. It's already happening now. You can enjoy it now for the next couple nights while the moon is out of the way in those early hours in the morning. But a typical meteor shower has its best hours from noon till midnight until dawn. And so if you're looking at those nighttime going into morning time hours being the best, you want the moon to be out of your way. Well, this year, unfortunately, that moon is rising during that time, or I should say, taking longer to set right into that time, and so it's closing down our opportunity of full darkness before dawn. And so with that moon taking longer to set every night, it's going to knock out that really peak morning of the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. While there is time, even on the 13th, when the moon is still not, it's set by 4:41 a.m. and it's still not astro twilight until, astro twilight, that is going to begin. We'd have to go over to the planner pill to see the exact astro twilight period, but judging by what's happening right now and just using my phone, the astro twilight morning dawn era is beginning at, I'm scrolling through, and astro twilight begins at 4:41. So if the moon's setting at 4:41 and this is 4:44, depending on your location, you might have a minute or two with the moon set, but don't plan on it. So this is why on the 13th, that peak is terrible. The 12th, it has at least an hour. And then the 11th, on Sunday, you have a couple hours before that moon is, while that moon is gone, and now you have no moon, you can see as many meteors as you possibly can. So tough year for the meteor shower and the Perseids, very tough year. But if you're in the southern hemisphere, let's look real quickly what you're going to have to experience. So we've been going to Perth. Let's go to New Zealand. Let's go to New Zealand this week. And New Zealand, just somewhere random there. Let's make sure that our auto detect, okay, Auckland, sweet. So now, looking at our timeline, If they went out, let's say you guys are watching this Thursday, and if you're watching it not live and watching the replay, you're going to possibly see this before I cut it off on Thursday. And if you do, that means, Thursday night, that moon rises at 11:46. It's still going till Friday morning. It's setting at 1:58. And then you have 3 to 4 hours of time with the moon not in your way while that galactic center is setting for you. And so you have an opportunity with plenty of panorama opportunities there. Opportunity. You have an opportunity for a chance at a panorama in the southern hemisphere for several hours. And each night it gets a little shorter. And the worst night is Sunday night, or I should say Sunday morning. You're going to see the moon all the way till 4 a.m. and have only 1 hour. And, Monday night, you're just not going to want to go. So Sunday night, you're not going to want to go till Monday morning. And from then on, full moon is just in the way. Nothing for Milky Way. So that is our opportunity. So going now, earlier the better, and you get a chance to see, once that moon sets, check out for meteors from the Delta Aquariids, or also the Perseids. They're still going strong, and the Perseids are getting in their peak time right now, leading up to the 11th, 12th, and 13th. So get out there. And click over here on the screen. That was the Astro Primer for August 7th, 2019. Whoo-wee. Welcome in, everybody. I hope this mic that you're not seeing right here is working okay. I'm trying something where I can stand up and be more free-flowing. I don't have to stay near a mic. You can probably hear me from this side and this side. And so you guys who are joining me on the live stream right now, hey, Haksu Lee from South Korea, that's awesome. Welcome in. That's fantastic. We are a international show already with South Africa, New Zealand, we have Australian followers, and now even South Korea. That's awesome. So see you later, Stanley Harper. Anyone else who's watching right now, give me the feed on whether or not we have an okay timing for my voice and the mouth movement. So you're hearing the audio and the mouth movement. Are they in sync right now? With this mic, how's the in sync issues? So I'm gonna go ahead and leave up this chat. Kathy can hear me, so that's awesome. And that's good. I'm hoping that it's clear, because obviously it sounds best when I talk right into it. But when I lean back, I wanna be free flowing. I wanna be able to dance around, point to Milky Way stuff. And this is gonna give me that kind of motion. And I hope it'll work. I hope it'll work well. You're actually seeing it a little bit in this video. I'm gonna tip it down a little bit. So go ahead. Jurgen says audio is okay. And are you guys confirming that it's also in sync? You can hear me, but is it in sync? My voice and everything. Dot Lien says yes. Zeralda says all sounds and looks good too. So that confirms it. Helen says yes. Greg says yes. Sync is good. Awesome. So thanks guys for joining me live. Those of you who are joining me live, we get to hang out, I get to answer questions. You get to hit me up with stuff right there. If you have any questions that are very, very interesting that you think will add to the conversation, pop it up here. Give me in all caps so I know. I don't have anyone else here to let me know if there's a question pending, so hit me up there, all caps. I will keep looking, and if I see in all caps, I will address the question. So let's go into the discussion today. We don't have much of an opportunity this week to actually capture the Milky Way ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about this transition we've just gone through. From June until the end, and now July began, I talked a lot about that Milky Way panorama, that awesome panorama. And now, for us in the Northern Hemisphere at least, it's gone. Well, why is it gone? What is it that's gone? How does it all work, and what's so great about the panorama? Well, I talked about what's so great. Well, let's talk a little bit about what makes the Milky Way shape. So typically, let's go ahead. Typically, you'll see these pictures, and I'll show you on my IMAX screen, but I'm reminded when I go to IMAX screen that I should do this. So, check it out. This episode, as all episodes of Milky Way Wednesday, are brought to you by our website, milkywayphotographers.com. So authors like Stanley Harper, Kurt Keyes, and let me go over here and scroll through some more. We've got an awesome article that came from Aaron Martinez, and let's see who else has written recently. Mary Beth has written recently, and we got great inspiration moments, things to talk about as a Milky Way photographer, advice, gear, things that you need, all right here at milkywayphotographers.com. So check it out. If you haven't joined us yet, make sure you do this, because they still have to fix this. I talked about it last week, but I didn't fix it. You must type in register at the end of the link, because our current link button is broken. If you don't see this window, then you're not seeing the right register. If you choose sign in and join and you try and create an account from here, it's just not working right now. So I've got to fix that. I will fix that, but it won't happen tonight. But milkywayphotographers.com, join us, get some achievements like these guys, and see who can get to Master Milky Way Photographer first. This has been a crazy year. It's gone by so fast. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how fast. So I'm saying Milky Way shape, the typical thing. Well, what is the Milky Way shape? We represent the Milky Way on here with these graphics, similar to what Photopil does. And here's the Milky Way. Well, if we go ahead, let me do it a little bit straighter. If we go ahead and draw a straight line through this, that's typical the shape of the Milky Way, right? But then we look online for Milky Way images and we see this all the time. And we also see, I'm scrolling past the ones that aren't as distorted. We see this. We see images like this one. We see this one. What's in common with these images? What do these images have in common of all the ones that I've shown you? I've skipped through a bunch of them. What's in common? Let's look at my iPad. When you see this section of my circles, it's meaning the center of the Milky Way. And all of those pictures have this, high in the sky. High in the sky. Look at that again. These are all southern hemisphere pictures where the crown jewel of the Milky Way galaxy is here at the center. Well, what's with this crazy bend? Just recently on the news, they've reported that they've done some studies. I don't remember who did it, but they declared this. It's actually showing up in this image search right here, that the actual shape of our disk of the Milky Way has a little flare off down and a little flare off up. And this is an orientation choice in a space that has no orientation. So it flares this direction and flares that direction. It's not an up or down. But this is our Milky Way shape. It is roughly this straight feature, flaring a little bit, having a glowing center. So this is our Milky Way shape, and yet we're constantly seeing images like this. And I talk about the panorama being so dang cool. So what's the deal with this shape, and how do we get this shape from this? Well, let's talk a little bit more about the Milky Way itself and why it's so uniquely shaped the way it is from our perspective here where we are in this disk. So first off, I think I'm going to zoom in right here and just talk about how we are a spiral galaxy, and I'm going to use these and these to show off how everything is moving around. So I have not switched over to my screen. So these are spirals coming off of our galaxy. And this galaxy is centered on a point, rotating around Sagittarius A, that black hole, and going around and around and around. And on these spiral arms, we're somewhere out here. We're not towards the center. How do we know that we're here and not towards the center? Why is it so obvious to us that we're this far out from the Milky Way core? Well, look at this picture again. How much of this Milky Way core is taking up in the sky? If you were sitting here, let's go to this screen real quick so you guys can see me large. So if we're sitting here looking off into the distance and you see this much space taken up, this few arc minutes of space taken up in your night sky of a subject, that subject is either really small or really far away. So it's just obvious already that that thing is not this big in front of us. It's not on top of us. How do we visualize something like that? How do we understand that we're far out here and what it would look like being in the middle? Well, one of my favorite ways of doing that comes from video games. I love video games. I'm a nerdy dude in my generation who plays it, but I also worked in the industry of video game creation. And in that game industry, I know I'd like to treat it like an art more than it probably should be appreciated for, but there's so many cool things you can do with video games, and one of them is actually visualizing things that are beyond easy comprehension without sort of a representation of it somehow. Well, a video game took on the very ambitious challenge of taking the Milky Way galaxy and representing it one to one. Now, one to one meaning that there's billions of stars in this galaxy and they all actually exist. So here's some game footage of me in Elite Dangerous showing you their map that shows all the stars, and they represent our star, our sun, as Sol, S-O-L. And so you'll see that here right in the center. So let's go ahead and play this video footage and I'll talk over it for a second. So you can see how here's Sol, and then here's the plane of the Milky Way galaxy that we're on. The plane that we're on versus the plane of the core. Wait, let's back up a little bit. The plane of the core. So if you think of planes, I talk a lot about breaking the plane in our composition. Think of these grids that are laying on top of each other. So imagine, let me draw them a little bit smaller over here so you can see it. So we got these squares and they're stacked on top. Well, that made a really funny shape because they connected a line. These squares are separated. Imagine these are all separated from each other. This is terribly drawn, but you get the idea that up here is a flat plane like this. This is a flat plane, here's a flat plane, and these are on different plane points. So this point right here going down along the y-axis has a different, the different characterization, declination. What would you even say? I don't even know. But as we go down, what plane are we here on Earth next to Sol, the sun, versus the core? Are we above? Are we below? How far away are we? Well, it turns out that when you look at the core of the Milky Way, let's say here's the biggest grouping of stars in the core, and Sagittarius A is somewhere, this black hole right here. Where Sol is very similar. Very similar. I can't remember if it's above a little, below a little, but it's within these first three planes. It's not something where here we are and here's the core. We aren't that far away. Look at how this happens in this video right here when I actually go and zoom out from Sol and see the whole galaxy, the spiral arms of the galaxy, and I look at it. Leanne says, fellow Elite Dangerous fan, yes. And look at the plane of the Milky Way core right there. And watch as we go and we zoom to Sol, and then I go ahead and go beyond it. Let me fast forward this. I'm going in towards the center of the core, past Sagittarius A, and then I come into this point and ooh, look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and get to this point where you see Sagittarius A and all these crazy stars, and just let it hit play for a second and fix that light. Those lights, their batteries are mostly dying. So get the grasp of how many stars one to one in Elite Dangerous it really means. There are billions of procedurally drawn stars in Elite Dangerous, and it represents our galaxy as this cloud of stars, and it clears up the mind on how all of the galaxy is formed. It's dust, it's stars, and all of that connected and collected at a certain plane. Looking through it, through the thick of it, it becomes more of a colorful, brighter band. And when you look away from the thick of it, up or down or out, you don't see as many stars. So looking at these stars in the center, let's go back to Sol. Excuse me. Oh no, the other light turned off now. Looks like I'm going to be finishing this off with less light. So now Sagittarius A, tons of stars. Now let's look what it's like at Sol again. So Sagittarius, showing the cluster of stars, just tons around it. Now we're traveling to Sol. And let me hit play. Look at that. I mean, it went from what we were seeing hundreds and thousands of little dots to dozens. That's our close to us area around us here at Sol. Let me show you again from this perspective. Sol, we got our close star Sirius, a close star of Alpha Centauri, and Lumen 16. I mean, these are all of our local stars. And when we look in towards the core, we see what we see in our Milky Way photography like this. Michael Goh, got to give him credit for this picture, Michael Goh's picture right here. In the southern hemisphere, you see the center of the core high in the sky, and then the stars around it separated. It's not because this is the galaxy and these are separate from the galaxy. Everything's part of that dust plane of stars, and as we're in it, we can see the stars closest to us, above us and below us and around us. Those are the closest stars, and the furthest stars are way off in the distance, making this shape that we see in the night sky. Well, let's talk about the shape of this night sky. I bring up this specific image and others from the southern hemisphere for one reason. Here's the horizon, and here's the core. All of us here who have been in the northern hemisphere looking out at the night sky and seeing the core, none of us, unless we've been to the southern hemisphere, none of us have ever seen the Milky Way core that high in the sky. It just doesn't go that high. And the reason is that our position on this globe and looking at the core has a specific angle and has a specific height of where that core ends up going in our viewing plane, our viewing angle. Now, Dot Lien asked me a question, and he kind of read my mind. Have you tried Space Engine? It's this universe sandbox. Well, yes. And I'm hoping, beyond hope, that I can turn it on right now and give you guys a perspective on it, because I couldn't get a screen capture of it in time tonight as I've been playing with these lights. And I want to show you what it looks like to see the Milky Way on the plane of the whole solar system. And let's see if I can get this to load while I talk about this picture a little bit some more. So what's happening with the shape of the Milky Way? What is it about the shape of the Milky Way that has this funny view? And this view is doing what? Let's look at my iPad again, and let's go to a new window. Well, the view is doing this, and then drawing the other parts of the Milky Way down here, and they're creating this shape. And here's our horizon. So why is it doing that? How are we possibly causing that? Let's see if I can get this to pop up in our window over here. If I get this, I've got the game, and I should show it to you guys now before that goes away. Let's see. Bring up OBS. Okay, sweet. You're seeing it. This is our Milky Way in the Space Engine. And you can see from the ecliptic plane that we are on, you can see, okay, come on. Let's see, what's it want me to do? Just middle mouse click, okay. You can see from the ecliptic that the planets orbit the sun. The ecliptic is viewing the Milky Way core like that. And when you look at, let's see, let's go to Earth. Where is Earth? And it's only hard for me to see because I am so far away from the computer. Mercury, Venus, Earth. Let's pause this, a space bar. Click on Earth, and let's go to Earth. So looking from Earth's perspective, we see how we have that tilt. And on the ecliptic of our orbit of the sun, this looks very familiar to us in the northern hemisphere, doesn't it? That's how we almost always see the Milky Way core, at that angle. And based on how we're rotating around and how the night comes and moves this in our sky, sometimes of the year, depending on our orbit, because remember, we are orbiting our sun. We are orbiting our sun like this. Depending on our orbit and our positioning, that Milky Way changes locations in the sky temporarily. And how do I mean? Let's kill this game before it kills our live stream. For all I know, this has already been destructive to the speed of our live stream. So let's quit it. Getting it out of there. Now I have a better answer, Phil Sisto says. Thanks. Phil says, and let me bring up his chat real quick so you guys can see it. He says, when I've taught small groups or individuals about Milky Way photography, I've been asked about the question about why it changes shape or creates a curve. I only ever had a BS answer about horizon curvature. Now I have a better answer. Thanks. And you're still going to get some more, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that shape that we get is actually entirely our fault. And it's our fault because of doing panorama images. When we look at this image here from Michael Go, it could be a very fish-eyed lens that's doing a single image, but most likely not. Why do I say so? Because if it was curving this with a single frame, it would be curving the horizon as well. But in our panoramas, when we stitch them together, we cause this look. Why? Because we are, and I'll go to my iPad for this. Let's do top down from here. We're standing right there. And we're looking at a Milky Way that spans from this part of the horizon to this part of the horizon, but it's going in a straight line. Excuse my coughing. It's going in a straight line. It's just going across from one side of the plane up above us and then over here. It's being bent by the atmosphere lensing that's happening. To our eyes, it sees it going over a horizon and a horizon. And it's actually at a point where it's straight every time we take a picture of it, but when we connect it in our panorama, we're curving it. So let's look at this again, this straight line, and we're capturing pictures of it. And we capture a square, we capture a square, we capture a square, we capture a square, and so on. Okay, let's look at that more clearly. Let's look at my Lightroom. Here's an image from a panorama, this panorama, where you can see the Milky Way has a shape. Has a little bit of a shape as it goes across the night sky, but mostly every image, it's straight. Look at this. Here to there. Here, diagonal to there. Still diagonal to there. When I was coming in from the core, diagonal from there to there. From there to there. Still diagonal. It's straight. So what happened with it here? Well, when I stitched it together, you can see all the stars that are bending. You can see the shape of the top of this that's being pulled together, causing these connections to then warp things together. And in that warping, and what's happening, let me be clear again, the horizon line is flat. The horizon line is flat. Let's go back to our pictures. Horizon's flat there. Horizon's flat there, flat there, flat there, flat there, flat there. Okay, so then the arch is happening. Well, in order to take that straight line and keep our flat line here in line with the rest of the flat lines, it curves into each other. They slowly get curved into each other. So when we take this picture of this square part of the Milky Way, then it connects with this square part of the Milky Way. It forces this bend to connect here and keep a straight line there. And so we're causing it. Let me show you that again with something we know is a flat surface. Move my cursor over here. This is the train trestle. This train trestle is something I've captured a lot with the Milky Way over it, and you can see it's flat as ever. When I get up close on it, I took some pictures of it, and I got underneath, and right about there, I started taking a panorama. So I turned my light off, and I started capturing. So here's a straight line. There's a straight line. Okay, here's the panorama because I went vertical orientation. So here's a straight trestle. Straight trestle at a diagonal, straight trestle at a diagonal, at a diagonal, and then I went off the other direction. So you see my whole panorama is right here, all the way to the far left where the Milky Way is in the northern part of the sky, to the Milky Way band going over the trestle, to where it goes underneath and terminates there in the gap between two trestle trusses. I should say the standing vertical pylons of the trestle, and then I continued beyond it just a little bit. Well, why am I showing you this? Because look what happens when I connect this into a panorama. Oh, you know what? I actually don't have that one right here in the collection. Foolish me. Let's go to all photographs and then see the final work. You know what? I might not have the final work right here. I'll just do it the easy way. It's right here. Look at how crazy curved that straight trestle looks now. As the panorama stitches together, as it forces these straight lines to come together, it warps and connects, warps and connects, warps and connects. So when we see a picture like Michael Go's, well, let's look at a picture right here from Aaron King. Curved Milky Way, curved Milky Way. Michael Go's picture, curved Milky Way. Example of being in outer space and looking at our Milky Way from Barnard's Loop out there at the Orion Nebula. Look at how flat the Milky Way is. It's a flat plane, this disk, with, you know, as we saw in that one picture, a little flaring. So then when you connect your panorama, showing extreme example off to the far right, extreme direction off to the far left, and then pull them together, it takes that flat picture that we look up to see all these parts and warps them a bit. So how does the Milky Way get its shape? From us. It's a flat, plain disk, but we cause its shape in the way that we stitch it together. When we look at that one picture I was showing you, that one video game that showed the space engine, that is a universal sandbox that has that awesome example of how the Milky Way is at this angle versus our ecliptic. Let me show you what I'm talking about on my iPad. Here's our ecliptic from the sun, and I'll just draw a big sun right in the center. And then these planets, you know, orbit around it like Earth. Oh, come on, do a little better circle, a little oval. Perfect. And then Venus, and we'll pretend Mercury is a light color too. All these planets are orbiting this Earth, and they have this plane. So if we looked at it from this perspective, we have a circle, and then we have this disk line of planets on it. Except for, you know, some of the odd elliptical orbits that we get from the further out dwarf planets, as well as I think it's Uranus or Neptune has a little off skew orbit, just a little off from everyone else. This perspective puts the Milky Way in this perspective. Our planet's here, and our Milky Way is like this. And so we get that vertical line that happens at night. We get that diagonal line, and then early in the season, in our northern hemisphere, we see it flatter. In that hemisphere of the south, they see the Milky Way directly overhead. So imagine, let's just draw this as a dome. This is us standing in the center of the dome, looking straight up, and you see the core of the Milky Way. The core of the Milky Way is expanding through the sky like this. It's completely overhead, and then as it goes through the night, it goes down, and eventually it's spanning from here to here, and you see the core like this. So that angle that happens in the southern hemisphere allows that awesome crown of the Milky Way to be high in the sky like this, connecting down right here and right here around us. And when you capture a panorama, have a flat terrain, you curve that into some really crazy, interesting shapes, as you saw in this image example of other people's. You know, you get really kind of bad, distorted versions, And you can get okay distorted versions like this. And this example, I think is also Michael Go. Maybe not, but that's another example. I think it's Michael Go is light, and that's probably Michael Go. Or, you know, the one that you and I in the Northern Hemisphere are familiar with. So guys, that Milky Way, it has a crazy shape all year round, and your opportunity is a different composition. Right now you're at this T, this perpendicular T that's hanging out with us. Let me go over here to the cam chat so I can see if any questions are coming through. We've got this flat and this, and we're working our composition around this shape. It's tough. I don't love it as much as I love everything else. In fact, not next week, possibly next week. In next week or a week after that, Milky Way Wednesday is going to approach all of the images I've ever captured on the Milky Way. I'm going to talk about every location and every Milky Way I've captured to see, you know, okay, which direction and angle is it facing. And I'm going to look at my portfolio and say, my favorite images are what? Well, without much thinking, my portfolio is my desktop. And which images are featured on my desktop? Pano, pano, pano. All of these are panos. And the reason why they're panoramas is because I just love seeing that much more of the Milky Way. If I lived in the Southern Hemisphere, or next August when I'm out there in New Zealand and I see that core up here, that's going to be brilliant. And I'm going to have more portfolio pieces come from that again. In fact, I don't know why I'm changing that. I should go back to the cam chat. So thank you so much for joining me again. You know, Jurgen mentioned something that I want to quote right here. He says, use a hula hoop. From the side, it's a disc. But as we are inside it, it gets curved. And you see how that curve goes in front of you. It's exactly like that. That's a brilliant example, Jurgen. I love it with the hula hoop. That's perfect. Rhonda says, I'm here. Better late than never. LOL. Thanks, Rhonda. And speaking of Rhonda, I hope that you guys are thinking, okay, Rhonda and Kathy are coming with me out to the Faroe Islands, and we're going to be there next month. And I'm going to mention it on the podcast and mention it in other videos, but Faroe Islands is an amazing place for landscape photography, and we have one more spot in our car to join us out there on that workshop. So if you're thinking about doing it, go to photogadventures.com/workshops and check out the Faroe Islands adventure, because that is going to be a blast. David asks, what is the dark section called that extends from the Milky Way core? Well, let's look at some of my pictures. I think I want to use this one because it shows it pretty well. Let me go to my IMAX screen. Now, I can't zoom in and out on my desktop background, but what is the dark section that extends from the core? Is he referring to parts like this or these? Well, all of this darker section of the Milky Way, what is it? No stars? Is it emptiness? No, it's not emptiness, it's dust lanes. It's actual physical dust that's between us and those stars in the rest of the galaxy, and they blacken out, you know, the view of those stars. It blocks them. If you look at the Milky Way with infrared, in fact, I'm curious about that right now. Milky Way image infrared. You can see how when it's got the infrared and you can see all of the stars, nothing blocks it. You don't have as much blocking anything because the Milky Way is showing up. Everything, all the stars in the infrared are showing up through those dust lanes. Nothing's blocking it. So Milky Way, and I'll do dust lanes. These dust lanes, these awesome things. What is this guy diagramming? Lanes of interstellar dust. He's just pointing to. So that's awesome. Here's a cool example of some dust lanes. Let me zoom in on them. You can see how that dust really looks interesting. And that point where we look at that comes off of the core, you might be considering or thinking about this, which is the Rho Ophiuchi. The Rho Ophiuchi complex. I spelled that wrong. I'll just borrow that. The Rho Ophiuchi complex has these two dust lanes that come off the core and point to a nursery of stars that are just glorious. As you can see in all these images, man, they really pop. They're just amazing. Color, vibrance, the dust lane that's in front of it is quite obviously dust. is just astonishing. Love it. Love the row of Fuki. And so these dust lanes, they most often don't have names. Not that I'm familiar with them. It's possible that astronomers have named the sections of dust lanes, but I don't know them. I should look it up, see if that exists. Philip says, this time of year, I tend to make the images way more about the landscape than the stars. Exactly, because you're going to see a Milky Way a little bit, focus on a lot of landscape. And Kathy says, I don't know about Rhonda, but I'm not really scary, so come join us when it's going to be a gas. So Kathy says, come join us in Faroe Islands. It's going to be a gas. Somewhere down the road, Terry says, hey, Aaron, just got here. Glad to see you're still going strong. Absolutely. I might even be stronger a little bit after walking through 95 and 98 degree weather in Italy for a while. Sunil points out, I'm glad you brought this up. It greatly confuses people how Milky Way can take that shape from our vantage point. I know it confused me. It confused me when I first looked at them. So, that example that Jürgen showed us, I think I want to do that in another feature in the future, talking about that hula hoop and give that example, because that's a great way of looking at it. I love that. And David McClure says, yes. So, thanks, guys, for joining me on Milky Way Wednesday today. How many did we have join us? It looks like we have 32. Fantastic. Love you guys for being here. Once again, all of this is brought to you thanks to everyone's support and gift of support and how do I want to phrase it? It's just a contribution that goes through Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/Photog Adventures, you can support us there and come and join us on MilkyWayPhotographers.com. The podcast is going to come out today. I have a podcast episode with just me talking, updating where we're at with Photog Adventures and what's going on. And so there's new episodes coming out all the time. And I am renewing my commitment to my Sunday videos because it's just devastating me to see so many adventures not go out there and be seen. So going to share those. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Thanks so much for being here. Sorry about that. I'm Aaron King. I'm with Photog Adventures. Thanks for watching. This is Milky Way Wednesday. Get out there and have a Photog adventure of your own and get out and capture the Milky Way. Not in 2 days, you'll be able to do it. For the next 2 days, yes, but after that, enjoy the full moon and what you can of the Perseid meteor shower. In a week, we'll have a chance at the Milky Way again. See you guys. Have a great night. And that's not even what I wanted to show. Awesome. Thanks, Leanne. So I will cut this from the final video, but I want to say thank you to you, Leanne. In the past, I've left, and you guys have put up some comments there, so I want to say goodbye to you in person. Leanne, great job, Aaron, especially in photographing the Milky Way 15 nights. Oh, yeah. I mean, I captured it 23 straight nights, and that's a perfect example that I need to finish putting those adventure videos out there because night 16 is halfway edited. Also, great podcast. It kept me entertained during my car ride back from Seattle to Houston, Texas. Oh, awesome. That's a long ride, and if you're entertained by it that much, fantastic. I got a new episode coming out tonight. I'm going to record it and edit it and get it out probably somewhere around midnight, but it'll get out there. And Drake Dyke says, thanks for all the great info. Thanks, Drake. You guys are awesome. Thanks for joining me live. I will cut this out in the replay, and I'll be cutting off all the episodes in the past and taking them down and then replacing them back up with replay onlys that are highlights only. So thanks, guys. Have a good night. I'm out of here. This light battery is going to probably die soon anyway, so I better turn it off. So see ya. And found it. Whew, that's too hard. I need to move these things around. And I guess I should turn off the mic. See you guys. Have a good one.